live.
Okay.
We are live.
We're doing it live.
We are doing it live. I'm just trying to see if comments are working. I don't know why my comment didn't work on the old YouTube there.
But mine is working.
I know. I could see that, and that is lovely.
That's
So
all that
I
matters.
guess that's all that matters. I see Craig. Craig is on. Good morning, Ashley and Paul. So YouTube comments are working. Mine just didn't.
Craig.
Maybe I'm blocked by the administration here. John, hello.
Hello, John.
John,
Good morning.
good to see you. John, also regular listener of the God Squad, so check out that show as well. So is Bill, watching on YouTube. Hey, what's up, Bill? If you are on YouTube, fantastic. Make sure you subscribe to the Choircast Network so you get notifications when we go live. And the sound is off and on for Tim. Well, let's check that out.
Sorry, Tim.
Sorry, Tim. Maybe
Sounds
anyone
good
else-
for me.
if
Well,
anyone
we're-
else can confirm that, I can hear everyone, and everyone sounds fine to me.
Yes.
So if you're watching on
Mhm.
Facebook in the either Keith or my page or on the Heresy After Hours and the sound is off, please let us know. Do us a solid, but I've got no evidence of that.
Yes, Tim says it might just be him, and that is my guess.
That's my story, and I am sticking to it. If you want to join us on the Heresy After Hours Facebook group also, that's where a lot of heretics like you come and talk about topics that may or may not be off limits at your church, or if you don't have a church, like I think everyone here.
Because if you're here, you're not at church.
Well, you might be live streaming from the pews. I don't know, with the
That
sound
would be
going down.
hilarious. Yes.
That would be really funny. Make sure you comment if you are at a church right now and you're live streaming this. Make sure you let us know. That's hilarious. Julie says the sound is here. Craig confirms that the sound is good. So sorry, Tim. That might be on your end.
It's not me, it's you, Tim.
It's
you.
not me.
Right, Tim.
It's
It is
you. So we are here. Paul and Ashley, say hi to the folks. Tell them about yourselves. And if you're here because of Paul and Ashley, well, we thank you.
Hi to the folks.
Tell people about yourself, Ashley.
What do you want people to know?
Oh, gosh.
This is an interactive experience for our
Yeah.
congregants here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, first of all, so excited to be here and just reflecting with you guys before we went live about how we're all so glad to not be in church right now. It's like,
Mhm.
who even was that person who literally, I think, every Sunday for my entire life went to church until COVID.
Every
multiple times a week,
Sunday,
et cetera.
like
every
every time
Sunday.
the doors were open, Monday,
all
Wednesday.
the time. Anyway, so
Yeah.
so it's fun to be here instead. And we've been on a wild journey, Paul and I, that started with us sincerely believing in the powerful transformational love of a perfect God and a perfect Christ. And we just always kind of embedded in our deep hearts, like, if Jesus shows up somewhere, everything should change about that place. And so we struck out in life in 1994. So we've been married over 30 years. And we found ourselves living in one of the most economically, environmentally disinvested and disenfranchised city in all of the US, one of the most racially segregated cities, Fresno, California. And it was populated with hundreds of elected officials and people who were in charge of things who claimed the name of Christ. And I'm sure sincerely connect with Christ. I'm not saying they weren't, but we're so proud of having power in their city. And we would hear things all the time at chambers of commerce events and other things like, we're a godly city, we're a godly city. And I'm going to blame Paul Swearingen, because this one is much more calm and tame. But this guy would always be like, if God's here, then why does the city suck so much? And just started to
And by the way,
on,
we can say Fresno sucks. You can't say Fresno
not
sucks.
gonna-
I wasn't about it. I was not going to say nothing.
Yeah.
words for anybody outside.
He ain't
But
heavy.
anyway,
He's my brother. Yeah.
that just started us down a path of what would it look like if God, our understanding of the divine at the time, what if that spirit really took over in a place? Would it change or not? 30 years later, here we are with a lot of scars and a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, big mistake. My name's Paul. Ashley and I, as she said, we've been married for over 30 years. And yeah, we thought faith meant we put action to our feet. And we decided when we got married to put roots in Fresno, California, which is not our home city for either of us. Although I know for me, I've now lived in Fresno longer than I've not in my life. And we wanted to see it change. And so we started investing in our city, and it weirdly led Ashley to run for political office. And this Republicans looked at this young woman and said, "Oh, isn't that cute? That little thing wants to run for mayor." and I ended up leaving sportscasting, which had been my job for years, and becoming a pastor, and she became mayor of our city. And
wow.
And all of that led to us finally saying, wow, this evangelical thing doesn't add up to what we believe Christ was speaking about. And then along came this guy named Donald Trump, and we're like, oh, no Christian's going to follow this guy.
Yeah.
Oops.
I wish you were right about that.
Yeah. And so because of Donald Trump, we get to sleep in on Sunday morning now.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Bless his heart.
Bless your heart.
And so we do a podcast called Evangelicalish, and I have a book out called Religious Right, Religiously Wrong, and we are fellow heretics along with you all.
Awesome, very cool. It's really wonderful to have you both on the show, and I can't wait to jump into some of these topics that you have kind of suggested for us to jump into. But before we do that, though, I do have to read a little bit of a sponsor ad, so bear with me for a moment. But it's really cool, though. Religionless Studios is a progressive Christian video Bible commentary on YouTube. Every single Sunday, the channel will move verse by verse through the text to comprehensively and compassionately interpret the Bible through the lens of liberation theology. In addition to the YouTube channel, Religionless also has devotionals, study guides, and a Discord community that are all accessible through their Patreon. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/@religionless. Go check them out. They're very cool. So yeah, let's
Well, let's kick it off with this. You mentioned Donald Trump. We got some, Keith, I haven't told you this, but we got some hilarious voicemails, and I'm wondering if it might be Pal.
Really?
My phone's been blowing up. So
this is beautiful. Finally.
I don't know if it is. I cannot confirm that, but we've got some hate mail coming for the hotline.
Bring it on.
And it accuses us of having Trump derangement syndrome because we critique Donald Trump. So I just before we kick off with the question here, I made this little graphic. So I don't think it's us who have the Trump derangement syndrome. This is an AI showing Donald Trump. For those watching, for those listening on the podcast, I apologize, but on the live stream here, we got graphics. So Donald Trump wading through the waters of Hurricane Helene, which is fake. People just freaking out. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for President Trump. And that lady's face is iconic at this point.
Yes.
And then the lady on the bottom got a Trump tattoo across her forehead.
Yes.
So I hate to say it, but I don't think that it's those of us who critique Trumpism and MAGA that are the ones with Trump derangement syndrome. But Keegan has a question here, and Paul, Ashley, will kick it off to you. Where does the idea that no Christian would follow Donald Trump come from?
Well, for me,
I can give you a little context in the group. I think he is in the Heresy After Hours group, and we like to keep things. What happens there stays there. But I think the context is basically like the Bible says a lot of things, and you could argue that it could argue for in favor of something like Donald Trump. So where do we get the idea that Jesus?
I read the Bible. Yeah.
I guess in some ways I think it's self-evident. People call him David, and well, David wasn't perfect, but David also repented for the most part. But Franklin Graham, when Bill Clinton had this little dalliance with this intern, said he's no longer qualified to be president. If he can't be trusted to run his household, he can't be trusted to run the country.
Yeah.
And who is worse at running his household than Donald Trump? And then all of a sudden, Franklin Graham says, when the P-Grab tape comes out, suddenly it's, we're not electing a pastor-in-chief, we're electing a commander-in-chief. So
yes, this is a private matter between Donald and his wife, and we shouldn't get involved with that. Yes, of course.
Well, I would jump in here and just to say, like, the very notion that Jesus and God are saying this is the person you should politically select, like, to me, that is in and of itself a stench. Like that,
Hmm.
um, the fact that we're even coupling these things. I'm a Christian who supports Trump. Like, who fucking cares? Like, you
Right.
in a democratic society, if we are separating politics and religion and our faith, you get to pick who you want to pick. And it should
Right.
be because you think they're the best person that align, their skills align with the job you're hiring them for. It has nothing to do with whether or not a person is going to crusade for whatever religious cause you may. I mean, so just the very question to me is flawed and yet it's so integrated into the fabric of our evangelical democracy, like evangelical population right now. That's the problem. That's the issue. It is I will just say, on the merits, if you think Donald Trump, boy, he handles this issue better, that he picks the right people for his cabinet, or for whatever reason that I could not possibly imagine, and you want to vote for him, vote for him. That doesn't make you better or worse. I mean, it just is your choice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But if you're saying it's because this person is Christ, like, or all these sort of weird religious messaging, that's the issue.
Right.
yeah, we were told to vote for Christians, vote family values, all of these things, and he is none of those, and I always thought it was stupid to, tell people to vote those things anyway. But all of the things we were told was Republican Christian voting, he is the opposite of. And so it's just crazy to me that this is the messiah of the right-wing Christian voter.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We were talking about this, that like, back to the question, right? Again, yeah, you could say, although the question doesn't specifically even mention the Bible. So I mean, I guess that's fair. I think for someone to I think the thing about evangelical Christians supporting Trump that really shouldn't surprise us is that even before Trump came along, evangelical Christians were not voting for candidates that reflected the ethics of Jesus, right? They already weren't in favor of policies or presidents or political figures who cared about immigrants. They already weren't voting for candidates and for presidential candidates, who cared about women or who cared about the immigrant or the refugee, people of color, people on the margins. So they already weren't doing that. It's not like we should suddenly be surprised, like, oh my gosh, how could you vote for someone so, anti everything Jesus stood for? It's just that it's so much more blatant and obvious. And I guess in the past, if you look at someone like George W. Bush, he at least gave some lip service, to I'm a Christian and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, oh, well, he's one of us, even though it was never reflected in anything he actually really did. But at least you could almost justify it more because at least he's talking and acting like, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And he said those kind of things, like, oh, there you go. See, the problem is, of course, when Obama said the exact same things and gave his testimonies, talked about how Jesus changed his life and talked about when he went forward at a Christian church and surrendered his life to Christ. We don't believe that. We just dismiss all that. But yeah, I think it's funny to me, the question. Just I guess I don't understand how, or I guess I'd like to flip it back around to the person asking the question, to Keegan. What are the things that you as a Christian find compelling and appealing about Donald Trump? John Fugelsang will always say, he gets people on his show and he'll always ask evangelical Christians that support Trump, he'll always say to them, can you name one thing that Jesus stood for that Donald Trump fights for? Just one thing. And of course they can't, because there's no such thing. There is no connecting the dots.
Well, and Keegan's follow-up here would be that, I'm not voting for him, but a group that worships a man who only values loyalty to himself. Jesus would be the first, I would assume, would support Trump. I would push back on that notion that Jesus valued loyalty to himself. Jesus valued loyalty to a cause that he himself stood for,
to the kingdom of God. Yeah.
The kingdom of God, which it also says is within you. It says is at hand. Mm-hmm. So there is a certain brand of Jesus that does say Jesus values loyalty to himself. We worship songs we worship Jesus with songs, but we don't do what Jesus actually said. Richard Rohr points this out. A lot of Christians point this out. Jesus did not seem to have what happened when they wanted to crown him king in John 6. He goes to the mountain of wilderness to be alone by himself.
Yeah, he
I
runs
don't
away
think
from the crowd.
Jesus really wanted to be worshipped and viewed in the way so many of us in the Christian church have viewed him. I think Jesus his point in Matthew 5. Those who are sheep don't even know Jesus' name. Those who are goats, Jesus, 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 and they don't do what he says.
That's right.
So I think it is a very narrow view of Jesus that says Jesus only values loyalty to himself. It's a very, very narrow reading of the text. And it's more of a fundagelical, if you want to use that term, reading of Jesus, not necessarily a historical reading of Jesus. And you're really kind of eliminating a lot of people who take Jesus seriously, who know, no, Jesus never asked us to do that. He didn't want worship songs about him. He didn't say his favorite term was not Messiah. It was the Son of Man, which is like, I'm standing in solidarity with you as a human. Exactly.
I'm a guy.
Exactly.
Well, and I think the thing about Trump that was stark for us is he's such a revelation of the hypocrisy of it all. He's the antithesis of everything Christians have always said they were voting for. He is a draft dodger. He is he thinks the military soldiers who died in battle are suckers. He said he didn't, John McCain was captured. He loved the soldiers that weren't captured. I mean, I actually think in some ways the blessing, I say, of Donald Trump is that he exposed what really was underlying in this heart of political Christianity is really what Christians want is power to be able to impose their views over the country. And maybe really the bottom line is they want to be in power and they just want low taxes, just give us low taxes and let us go conquer countries that'll make sure our gas prices are low and we'll be happy,
Right. Exactly.
It's a very, very self-centered religious political belief, which is anti-Christ.
Right. Yeah, it really is. And I guess the thing that we should be grateful for Trump for is that almost on a weekly basis at this point, almost really, I guess even daily, I wake up every morning and I'm looking for the what the fuck moment of the day. Like, what did he do now? Oh my gosh, he stood there for 40 minutes and just danced to YMCA or Ave Maria, 3 versions of Ave Maria. or yesterday, he kicked off a rally by going on and on about Arnold Palmer's, schlong and how big it was. And like, so it just shows you.
Or this week he talked about Harvey Weinstein getting schlonged.
That's what it was. But he also talked about Arnold Palmer's penis. So it's like, every time he does that, it's showing you just like, and yet evangelical Christians are still going to vote for him. He's still going to be their champion. They're still going to, either explain it away or there was actually a thing where Mike Johnson was on some news program this week, maybe yesterday or this morning. And they asked him about those comments, the Arnold Palmer comments, and he poo-pooed them. Oh, he's just being silly. And he's like, really? Because I think if Joe Biden kicked off a rally and spoke for 10 minutes about Arnold Palmer's, the size of his penis, you would be saying that he is in mental decline and is unfit for office. I'm pretty sure that's what you would do. But again, like Trump is exposing the hypocrisy over and over. Like, how far will they take it? So much farther than you thought they would.
Did you guys ever see John Mulaney's horse in a hospital?
Yes.
Bit. Oh, yes. Matthew, you've got to see it.
It's in a hospital.
It perfectly describes Donald Trump as president. The horse is in the hospital. He shouldn't be there. He doesn't know what he's doing there. It perfectly explains. And when suddenly it's quiet, you're like, oh my God, what is the horse doing now?
Yes.
You want to be able to hear the horse because then at least you have some idea of it is beyond hilarious and so poignant as to where we are.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, let's I guess shift gears a tiny bit, but not really. Peter, hi, hello from Michigan. Hi, Michigan. It is very important you vote.
Oh, we
Yes,
need
please.
you.
I'm in California. I already voted, but I kind of assumed that. Well, Donald Trump says that California went to him in the last election if it was legal votes, but I
If
digress.
Jesus had counted the votes, he says.
If
If
Jesus
Joe-
accounted.
Oh Lord, have mercy. So you actually, you're not still mayor of Fresno, are you?
No, I termed out in early 2017. So I was we have
Okay.
term limits here in Fresno. So I was in for 2 4-year terms, 2009 through 16, the Obama years, as I like to say.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So on election night 2008, I was on the ballot with Barack Obama, and my coalition was like at our election night watch party was 50% of the room was for John McCain and 50% was for Obama, and like the results would come up showing different states and the presidential, and everyone would just kind of be quiet and like trying to be respectful, aware that there was like, kind of a split in the room, and then the local results would come up and we would all cheer. Yay, yay, yay. Yeah. So that was, it seems like so long ago, but
Another time.
another
Yes.
time back when Tea Party people, we considered them crazy. Now they're like, oh
Oh,
God,
yeah.
can we please
Bring 'em
invite a
back.
Tea Partier? I know. We're
Exactly.
like the normal people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Tim says we should have a new worship song for kids, counting votes with Jesus. There we go. A 1, 2, 3.
I
Hey,
like
don't. There are people that will make worship songs about Donald Trump, but don't put
But
it
we're the
back.
ones with TDS, right? Yeah, I am the chosen one. So what is your connection? You'd mentioned this in an email before. What is your connection with the family? We have covered this
The documentary, yeah.
documentary on the Heretic
Oh my
Happy
gosh.
Hour.
Oh.
And once you sent that, I was like, oh, we got to talk about that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll set it up, and then Paul, you've got to do the color on it. So it was, as I recall, it was 2014. Is that because I remember, Paul, I was running
I
for
think
state
so, yeah.
controller. So it was that I was also on the ballot for a statewide contest in California, which was my first partisan. Like running locally, you're just nonpartisan, and you kind of get to avoid this stuff, and it's amazing. Let
And
me
we
just
were
say,
still
to
Republican
serve.
at the time. You were running
And I
as a
was still a
Republican.
registered Republican, so I
Wow.
was on the statewide ballot, and all of a sudden having to go to like local county party chapters and went to the state convention and all these things. And I mean, my whole year I was just like, what is this? It was so just so much conflict in my inner world of like, this just doesn't feel right. But anyway, we got invited to go to the National Prayer Breakfast
Let me
that
interrupt you
year.
real quick and interject. Neil Kashkari was the Republican candidate for governor.
For any
Nutball,
Californians.
and it was
I
a
mean,
big
I'm not
deal
gonna
that
say that.
Ashley. You're not okay. Well,
No,
Ashley, you
because I
wouldn't
know him
endorse him,
now.
right?
Wouldn't endorse him. Then I thought as a candidate, he was a little
Okay.
goofy, and he was like going around showing up as a homeless man in different cities to try to get attention. He was running against Jerry Brown in the
Okay.
middle of the Great Recession, and Jerry Brown was the only person like holding the line on any kind of fiscal conservancy in California. And but for a fiscally conservative Democrat holding that line, I mean, unions were going to run through. I mean, like there was so much on the line, and I was like, I'm not prepared to say that I think Neil Kashkari is a better governor for California in this time. So that ended up being like, in fact, oh my God, after I delivered like a convention speech, LA Times, I said like, no, I'm not endorsing Neil Kashkari when I stepped off the stage, and that was the headline, and it was like the non-endorsement heard around the world in little tiny Republican circles in California. To this day, probably like would have not lived that down. But anyway, I was like, I just got to tell
Sorry.
the truth. I think
I
Jerry
sidetracked
Brown's the
us
right
there.
guy. You did. That's all right. Anyway, it all builds to the drama. So we get invited to the National Prayer Breakfast, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know where this politics thing is going to take me, and this may be my last couple years in office. We should take a moment to go to the National Prayer Breakfast. If President Obama is the president, he's going to be there. This is going to be a cool thing.
Through our religious church connections, by the way, we got invited.
We got invited because during this whole time we were like in this weird little space where Paul was a pastor and I was a mayor, and in our circles, which were like the more charismatic end of evangelical world, which was a little bit sheltered from a lot of this right-wing stuff for a while, but they were starting to like get that drumbeat of in the name of Jesus. And because, you know, like all the Seven Mountain stuff was starting to infiltrate in our like spectrum of Christianity. So we had a lot of like very well placed, influential leaders of churches in that time that were getting connected politically. And they're like, oh, you have to meet Paul and Ashley because they're doing it. They're doing the Seven Mountains thing. And we're just like, what are you talking about? Like, we're like, we're here to serve. We're here to follow Jesus. That's it. But we end up in these weird circles or weird spaces. So we get the invitation to go from some friends who are on staff at the National Prayer Breakfast. And then I'll let you take it from here, Paul.
Well, and the National Prayer Breakfast is run by the family, which is that weird, secretive group. And so, you know, we're kind of excited. We love Washington, D.C. And we end up like in the front row. They tell us to get there early because so we're like the first people there. The room is empty and and our seats are like right up front. We end up sitting like 8 feet away from Barack Obama.
Wow.
And just for fun, in the event itself, we end up having Ted Cruz and Nancy Pelosi at our table, and Ted Cruz's dad Raphael, who's a total nutball, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, Ashley.
Well, so I am famous for like not knowing who famous people are, and so we're sitting there early at like 6:30 in the morning waiting for this breakfast. It's like us and the waiting staff that are putting the butter pats out, and we're like sitting in our seats, you know. And so finally the room starts to populate a little bit, and this man comes and sits next to me, and he's like in his little like I don't know leisure pants and whites and little bolo tie, and like it says his name on his name tag, Raphael. So he sits down, and I'm like, oh hey, I'm excited. Finally, someone's at our table. We can talk to somebody. And so I said, what do you do, Raphael? I'm a pastor in Texas. Really? My husband's a pastor. Meet Paul. I'm from Texas, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just having this lovely little conversation. And then fast forward like 45 minutes later, he's got a seat next to him. And here comes Senator Ted Cruz, sits right down to him. Then I'm like, oh my God, I've been talking to Raphael Cruz for the last 45 minutes and had no idea that's who it was.
And we didn't ask him if he was involved in the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, darn it.
That had just come out. Yeah. So anyway, so from there.
And the first thing he said to us is, why would you live in California? Yeah, I mean, and we're like, ha, 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 funny joke from a Texan. And he wasn't laughing. And then Nancy Pelosi came, and it was kind of funny to watch them interact, and they clearly had great distaste for each other. But anyway, after the prayer breakfast, and by the way, we had some Eastern European people sitting with us there. I mean, we saw this whole thing starting. We had no idea what we were in the middle of, but now knowing how Russia and Russia, no, it was happening all around us. We were watching it happen. They were infiltrating politicians through these Christian events and NRA events. And so they're like, we want you to go meet Doug Coe. And every time somebody would say Doug Coe, they would like kind of start dropping their voice a little bit like this.
Yeah. And we're like, cool, whatever. Yeah, let's go say hey to Doug. Sure. Like, no big deal. Like, you know, not whatever. Just so it's such a reverence. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, being in elected office, it is really important that you do not let that whole power thing like get into you. You don't ingest like who freaking cares? It is not about power. It is about, you know, what you're able to accomplish. And so I'm thinking to myself, I've literally been in the same small room with President Obama. Why would I treat a person who's a past? I mean, like, I don't get that this is a big thing, but the whole environment around him was that we were meeting like the king of earth.
Yes.
Even our friends who were pastors and stuff, they were like, okay, we're going to go. They take us to the suite and we're in this outer room. And
to the inner, then you go into the inner chamber.
Yes,
the sanctum, the inner
this
sanctum.
young woman comes out. She's like, Miss Doug will be with me. We'll be inviting you in shortly. I mean, it was, and my skin is crawling. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
WTF. And there's one other couple there too, and finally they take us into the inner sanctum, and Doug Coe is there. He's in this high back chair. There are 2 couches on either side, and we sit on one, and Doug has no interest in talking to me whatsoever. I'm just some pastor, but Ashley, and he gives her this little globe, and you're one of us. It was,
Oh, whoa.
I have
It was
never,
like this.
He
It was
hands
like
you a
this.
globe?
It was okay. So we chitty chatted, like, again, Paul and I are like, hey, what's up? Yeah, good to
hi.
see you. What's going on?
This is
Hey,
kind of
man.
cool.
But
Like,
we're watching our
nothing is
friends
fancy
like
here.
just genuflect. It was
Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah, he's like ringed with people on either
Mhm.
side.
Mhm.
And so we're just chitty chatting, and we're like, yeah, like we think that Jesus changes things. And so, like, when we want, our city to change, like just kind of whatever our thing is. And so it was like he was checking us out a little bit. I don't even really remember what all we were talking about. And then it was almost like, okay, we passed a test of some sort. So then he starts reciting a little mantra of like, we are now friends, and in the spirit of friendship, I offer you this gift. And there was like this
Behold.
like,
Behold.
like a little globe, like a little round globe. And I thought it was odd at the time, but then the next day, because we went back for like something else at the conference. The prayer breakfast is a part of this multi-day conference.
Yes,
So we went back
yes.
the next day, and someone had set up a meeting with the wife of a U.S. senator. And I guess because I'm a woman, I get to meet with the wives. So I got to sit with this woman,
Right.
and I was just chitty-chatting with her too. And then she did the same mantra, and then she did the you have a glow. And so then I thought,
So now you've been
this is
globed
the
twice.
thing we do. Yeah.
She was the wife of the senator from Florida who then lost to Rick Scott.
Okay.
She was
Yeah.
her
And
husband.
and if I recall, her husband, I think it was Senator Nelson, he was a pretty moderate, like kind of like conservative traditional Republican, not in the, other vein that sort of started flowing at that time. Anyway, I think he was probably a pretty decent guy and lawmaker. But yeah, so then it turns out we're like, oh, there's this little thing that you get the word said to you, and then you're in the club.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
and it's I do believe there is some spirituality, mysticism to this world. I'm still kind of in that. And there was something off. Something was wrong. I could
Yeah.
just feel it. It was so
I think they call that bad juju or something,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
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 Maybe it was just watching people react around us, and we're just like, ick.
Well, and
But
then
it
I
felt
think
off.
it's okay. So our experience was like we didn't have context going. The documentary hadn't come out, right?
Right.
We
Yeah,
didn't.
you don't know. Yeah.
We don't know, but our like Paul said, all of our sides were like, this does not feel like the spirit of Christ that we connect with in like our faith tradition. Like, what is it us? Why are like what's wrong with us? Because this seemed to be the sort of flow of, if you love Jesus and democracy, then you should be this way. So we're just kind of going through life, I feel like, with this Teflon coating. And then years later, the documentary comes out, and we're like, well, no shit. I mean, like, of
Yeah.
course this was a weird thing. We felt it, we know. So it was like kind of delayed affirmation, I guess, of our instincts.
Yeah, pretty creepy stuff. I
And-
had
and-
done. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I go for it, and then I have a question.
Oh, no, go ahead. Ask the question.
Oh, I was just it might take us down. You might miss your opportunity, Keith, to
No,
speak.
go ahead.
And as we know,
You're going to take us somewhere better. Go ahead.
I don't
Hey,
know if I will.
One thing
might-
I would say before we go down another road is we would get contacted by these Seven Mountains guys because of Ashley, and she did an amazing job as mayor, by the way, and almost universally that's acknowledged now on both sides of the aisle that she did an amazing thing as mayor. But like Lance Wallnow, if you guys know who Lance Wallnow, who's now one of the Trumpiest of Trumpy nutballs out there.
Yes, he is.
He contacted us by email, and we need to take the Seven Mountains,
Yes.
and I emailed him back because I was always kind of the bulwark between Ashley and these guys, and to make sure they were on the up and up. And so I emailed him back and said, well, our philosophy is that Jesus served. He didn't take the mountains of culture.
Yes.
He served the mountains of culture. He
Yes.
died for culture. He didn't take it over.
Yeah, it's power
And
under, not power over.
Right. And we would then not hear back from Lance Wallnow
yeah.
ever again.
He wrote you
that
off.
kind of-
And
They
real
want their
quick,
globe
tell the
back. They
Mario
want their globe
Murillo.
back, by the way. You have to get that globe
They,
back.
I wish I could find it. I
What's
swear,
that?
I should
The
have
globe.
kept it in like my family globe. I had two.
I think we
Um,
probably threw them away to not
I
have
think
that
so.
nasty
Like,
shit in our house. Yeah.
but right about that same time, Paul, tell the Mario Murillo story, and then I know Matthew, you said you had a question. Sorry to take us down another little path.
That's all right.
Oh,
That's
it's not
right.
going to go another path. It was just go for
Okay.
it. It's just these people led to the people who wrote Project 2025, right? They're heavily
Yeah.
involved. Am I correct in that?
All very,
Correct.
very connected.
Okay.
Correct. Very.
Yeah.
Which Mario Murillo
Well,
story?
when he came to Fresno and like ministered in our church,
Well,
had a like encounter here, and
this is
say,
the crazy thing. Mario Murillo, I don't know if you all know who Mario Murillo is. He's also one of Lance Wallnau's crazy buddies. But he was a very famous sort of Jesus People movement guy. Had like big moves of God, winning souls in Berkeley when he was in college and things like that. And he came and spoke in a little town close to us, Los Banos, and I always tell the story. I was sitting in the front row because I was a pastor of renown in the area, and he gave the worst altar call I've ever heard in my life. And I'm like, oh God, that's awful. And it was like the first thing he did when he got up to preach. I'm like, that was a terrible altar call. That was awful. And I turned to look around, and there's like 100 people coming forward, for this altar. Like, there was something amazing that in that, and we would say in our context that he had this spirit that drew people to God. It was, and I was like, wow, and so I invited him to come to our church, and he spoke, and it was, it was good. He was connected to something divine that was amazing. And then the next thing I knew, he was coming to Fresno, and he had put out this flyer that was getting sent out everywhere to Fresno is the killing fields of California. People die, and and we need to pray. And
the killing fields. You didn't even know.
I sent him a text, and I'm like, okay, A, why are you coming to Fresno and not letting me know? And B, why are you saying these horrible things about our city? And oh, that's right. And oh, I know where you're going. And he had been like ripping Jerry Brown and saying what a horrible person Jerry Brown is. And afterward, when I first got to meet him, I was like, hey, we really think that, Jerry Brown's doing a pretty good job, actually. And to just say these things about him, that's not what Christ has for us to do. And the next day he came and said, oh, God really convicted me with your words last night. And I'm supposed to come before you and repent of what I said about Jerry Brown. And God told me never to talk politics again. Now I'm kind of revealing a private conversation, but yeah. And the next thing I knew, he was like, he had moved to Reno because California was too evil. And now he's where he is today. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude. So he moved to Nevada because California was too evil. Yeah. Yes. Does he know where Las Vegas is? Does he look that up?
Basically California, so they don't count that.
And now he's the total QAnon prophet.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that to me that was really impactful because we went out to dinner with him. I think he had like a 2-day stay or something in Fresno. We went out to dinner with him, and we were talking through the issues of our community and the things we were doing to like try to change those things and seeing results from that work, etc. And the next day he tells Paul, like, God spoke to me in the night and said, you are not to talk politics again. And I remember thinking like, God, that's amazing that in our community, there's this like atmosphere of politics and religion are not the same, like keep them apart. And like, I mean, it really was affirming that maybe something good and different was happening in our community. And like, literally it wasn't months later that, and I was telling him all about our homeless strategies, all this kind of stuff. Then he hits with this mailer about how we're the homeless capital, which wasn't true. I mean, it was so opposite of what he said to our faces the next day that he felt while was in our community. So anyway, it was troubling.
It really is a grift. And there's a billboard just south of our city now. He's coming again.
Ugh.
and it's I really do think they get caught up in the power and the money of it all.
Yeah,
That
Bill.
has to be
I
it.
said my heart is broken. I had forgotten that whole story, Ashley, and my heart is breaking over it because I really do think he carried something that I saw as beautiful and special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it is sad, and it's. I wish people just thought about their theology more. Like there's 40 million of us who live here, right, in California now, right?
Right.
How can you say something about California? Like all 40 million of us? It's like when people say like, "Oh, I heard this too when we lost most of Paradise in the campfire up here. Oh, it's God sending California a message." I was like, by wiping out perhaps the most conservative town in California? Like that makes no
Yeah.
sense in your theology, right? You believe in a God and like, God's a Republican basically. So God, in order to get us send us a message, is to wipe out the most conservative with the church on every street corner. Like,
Mhm.
if we're gonna be people who believe in a God of some sort, like, don't we have to like tease our theology out in the real world and see how it plays out? I'm stuck on this that we can just like create these whole like monolithic structures about this state's getting punished and this state's getting a harbinger and a message, and this is showing them that they need to repent. It's always like, I mean, I thought Jesus, like, most of his message was like, work on your own heart.
Yeah.
Maybe stop judging others. Don't maybe like clean off your own porch, sweep off your own porch before you worry about your neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I-
It always amazes me that the evangelical Christian God is so full of wrath. And even in their theology says that, oh, all the wrath was poured out on Jesus on the cross. He still seems to have a lot of wrath, plenty of it to go around. He's just constantly gets wrathful about, California and sends an earthquake or a fire, and gets upset about Florida for some reason and sends a hurricane or something. It's like, it's always his wrath. Like, when does he finish with the wrath part? Like, he's just always wrathful. He's never not going to be wrathful. And yeah, so
I-
it's this perpetual wrath of God.
By the way, I saw Peggy's comment there about Sean Foyt. He came to our church in his early days when he was doing the Burn 24/7 tours, and he was not somebody that I thought carried something beautiful. I told our team that guy never comes back here ever again. He was a shyster from day one.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of them in our circles of Christianity. But to me, the story of Jesus was there were these religious guys, and I'm sorry to denigrate a whole state, but sort of this Texas idea of, aren't we great because we have
Yeah.
these laws and rules? Look how great we are because
Right.
we're these holy people because we hate these things. And Jesus would go around saying, big whoop, you don't take care of the poor, the foreigner, the
Yeah.
outcast, and the widow.
Yeah.
And so to me, California is the place where it's like, yeah, we're messy, but at the end of the day, we're going to try. Our heart
Right.
is to care for these things that we're supposed to care for. We do it in a really messy, ugly, not great way sometimes, but I always believe the heart of what we're trying to do in California is the heart of Christ much more than these red states that are saying, look at us, we ban all of these things. Aren't we great?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So we got one more comment from Keegan, and I got it. God's love is only for those who worship his kid. His wrath is for everyone, apparently. Yeah, in their theology, certainly.
Yes.
Again, like there are 40,000 Christian denominations, right?
Yeah. They don't
and
all
and
feel
there's
that way.
and it's not, but it's not just a Christian thing. Muslims fight.
Yeah.
Gandhi was killed by a Hindu nationalist.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge, like, if we scapegoat religion, I don't think we're all that enlightened. This is a human thing. We'll do it with politics. We'll do it with religion. We'll do it with God or no God. People are tribal, and we're always going to have these infighting things,
Yeah.
And
But it's also, it's wrong to say that the problem is religion because these people are identifying themselves with a certain religion, right? Because to your point,
that's weird.
there are, to me, I think really the problem, if you want to really narrow it down, is fundamentalism. It's so fundamentalist Muslims, fundamentalist Buddhists, fundamentalist Christians, fundamentalist Hindus, right? They're the ones who become violent. They're the ones who scapegoat, and so that's what we have to be afraid of. It's not religion itself.
And our own
Um,
pattern of falling into that.
That's right.
Because
We're
we-
human beings. Exactly.
Yeah.
Human beings fall into these patterns. And I really appreciate some of the comments that have come up as we've been talking, pointing that out, right? Like, it's very sad that when we hear these stories about people, like, they have a moment of clarity. They understand, like, yeah, you know what? This is the wrong direction. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be spending my energy on this. God told me never to talk about this again. But then they fall back into it again, right? We're human beings. We fall into temptations. We do the things we shouldn't do, even if we know the right thing to do. And it's really difficult especially when there's power involved. There's, prestige. These are the things that allure us and kind of have us not follow what we know in our heart of hearts is the better way, the better path, and yet we get pulled into it and we start going along with the crowd. And people want me to say this. When I say this, people cheer for me. When I say this, my giving goes up. When I say this, when I act this way and talk this way, more people show up to my events. So it's really difficult when you're making your living doing these things to do things that go against that, right? That's really, really challenging. And we all would struggle with that. So we have to be careful, right? And we don't want to scapegoat them either. It's just a human thing.
So how exactly is the family and all that tied into Project 2020? And when did Project 2025 come about? Do you all know? Like, is this something they started working on? I know that I mean, you could draw it all the way back to like whatchamacallit, Hagee and all them, but like when did Project 2025 specifically start coming into as a plan?
Well, I don't know that either of us are that expert on it, but just the coverage that I've seen, it's when Trump lost in 2020, the Heritage Foundation and affiliates like doubled down. I think there was this observation that of all these like Trumpy sort of governmental hangers on, that they missed the window to really push the agenda. Like they didn't, Trump didn't expect to win. They weren't prepared and equipped. They were, because of the Federalist Society, they were super ready to push judges. And that was, I think, this really successful thing that they just started getting all these conservative judges appointed, but they missed all the other wings of government. And they're like, we need to make sure that the next time we get the White House, we start on day one ready. And like, we basically dismantle the federal government system and we don't lose the window again. So it seems to me like this all really took shape during, the Biden years, essentially. And then of course got leaked to the public, and the ideas that are in there go back for, decades.
Yeah.
But it's probably what is so concerning about this upcoming election is at least there were guardrails. There were, on this crazy road of Trump, you had some professional staff who understood the importance and the role of government and had a little more of a traditionalist view. And you had the federal, judiciary. And that's what held for 4 years. That's what held our democracy together. And what we know will happen in a second Trump term is for sure the bureaucrats that will be appointed from day one will not have any of the likeness of like, oh yeah, these are the experts who they have a more conservative point of view, but they know how to run things and they understand the value of government. Those folks are gone, and the judiciary is in shreds. And especially now we know with the Supreme Court. So like that is what's, I think, it's understandable why everyone's concerned.
And I think it's probably true that Trump knows nothing about Project 2025 because he doesn't want to know anything about.
He doesn't know anything about anything.
He's not a smart man. So, but what he'll do is say to the guys who love Project 2025, sure, do whatever you want and let them go. But I mean, the roots of Project 2025, we could trace way back to a lot of things. That's when the Republicans decided, okay, black people are never going to vote for us. Let's go get the racist South in the Nixon years. Or I always point everything back to Paul Weyrich, the Republican operative that said, basically invented the moral majority and said, hey, we can weaponize abortion to manipulate evangelical Protestant voters. And he was in the 60s. He's the guy that said, hey, conservative Christians are never going to be the majority. So we have to find a way around American institutions and American democracy. These things are not working in our favor, so we've got to find our way around them. And he kind of came up with the idea of homeschooling and of starting our own TV networks and our own publishing houses. And, let's start siphoning ourselves off and weakening the society. And abortion is the thing we can weaponize to do that. And that's really the genesis in my mind of Project 2025 today.
Yeah, and you make a good point that a lot of the elements that's the scariest parts of Project 2025, a lot of them you can point back, because we were just talking about like the 7 mountains, right? I first heard about the 7 mountains thing in like the 90s, and people were talking to me about it at that time. And I think it came up for me because at that time, I was really into Dallas Willard and the whole idea of the kingdom of God, and the gospel was about the kingdom. And I was talking to someone about that, and they said, oh, that's like the 7 mountains. And then they explained it to me, and I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. That is not at all what I'm talking about. But they thought it was, right? They thought it was about bringing the kingdom like this, right? In sort of this artificial way, politically, right? Christians having control of things. So that's when I first heard about it, but that's also immediately when I realized, no, this is not the same thing. This is going down another path. So a lot of elements of it are older, but they've all been sort of conglomerated together into Heritage Foundation has kind of pulled these things together.
Yeah.
Also, like David Barton, all of his garbage about America's a Christian nation. He had the ear of George W. Bush, right? He was an advisor to George W. Bush, and was pushing all these ideas, and to many other senators and congressmen, that America was founded as a Christian nation, and we need to get the Bible back, and the Bible's the answer to everything. And so all of those things are still sort of echoes that are now being solidified in Project 2025.
Can I take a minute to state a really obvious thing? Just like this is a commercial for you're not crazy if you think this. Having been inside local government for 8 years and was a near bankrupt city in the middle of the Great Recession that had to work a lot with the state's capital and with the nation's capital, and really being like in the nonprofit world and kind of around government types for, almost 30 years now. In case you're wondering, it is absolutely true that government is pretty ineffective, but it's not devious. It's just decades and decades. I mean, it's no different than any organization, whether a church or a nonprofit or a business that, just over the years, you just get the barnacles of all the things you're trying to navigate for. And it is desperately in need of people who are skilled, who love and value free society and can bring the technique and the quality of thinking and the imagination and genius that's needed to make these institutions like fly again. Like that, like reforming is so wonderful and beautiful. And so I feel like in this, like Project 2025 is terrible. A lot of times we don't leave room for and it's okay to say top to bottom, wherever you find yourself, if you can make a difference in improving one of these institutions, you should. And they are very decrepit, and they are, I think the hearts are in the right place, and they just need like some better tools and skills. That doesn't mean that Jesus wants it all to blow up, I don't know. It feels like, can we just be normal about this for a second and be able to say like, yeah, we probably need to reform some stuff. And like our nation is, well, I shouldn't say it that way, but like we're going to celebrate the 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in a couple years. And like when things get to be that old, like they probably need like to be redone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, like, oh, government is bad and blah, blah, all the shit. So,
part of the reason that Trump is getting voted for is because our government has been unresponsive to human needs, I think, for quite a while. And people are kind of tired of it. Yeah.
But a
Yeah,
lot of that is like the conflicting interests and the constant critique of all government is bad that goes back to, I mean, the
Right.
very roots of it is racist.
yeah,
Government was seen as a place that was accommodating of and first affirming of Black people. And so therefore it
right,
must be bad. So let's start trashing it. For the last 100 years, we've had that steady stream. And so now, every time government tries to take a move, it's like, that's terrible. You're bad. Race, what abuse, fraud, waste, abuse, blah, 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 blah. And decades later, guess what? Your institutions are not very effective.
And
right.
and you don't get your best and brightest running for office, because who wants that job?
Mhm.
Everything you do, you're going to be, trying to do something good for people. They're going to say, you're a pedophile,
Right,
you're sacrificing babies in the basement somewhere. I mean, who wants that job? So
right.
we're getting Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greens,
Yeah,
rather than Ashley Swearengens and people with brains running for office.
yeah.
So, and
Well,
I
yeah.
don't mean to denigrate everybody, but yeah, we get the king we ask for, right?
That's
Quite a bit.
sadly true. Yes, and actually, to your point, the founding fathers knew that the documents they created and the country that they were founding, that it wasn't perfect. Right? They had the assumption that people later on would come along and modify it as needed. Right? It was meant to be sort of a living document. It was meant to be. That's why we had amendments. That's why we have these things, because they didn't. So that's what the problem with when people now are saying, well, no, we need to go back to the founding fathers. Like, yeah, but you're not. Because if you were, you would realize that what they wanted was for you and for us, for the people, we the people, to decide what works best now, not to stick to old ideas that worked in the 1800s or something, 1700s, um, and hold on to it stubbornly, even if it's not working and it's obvious it's not working, right? So we do need to recognize that progressivism was sort of assumed and built into it by the founding fathers. They expected us to change and grow and modify.
So we're coming up on an hour, but we do have a guest with us. We're going to bring Tabby on. She has a comment before the hour hits, and then we'll let everyone go back to their church, right, or football games,
Yeah,
or whatever,
or football games or
whatever people do on Sundays.
I don't know. Take a nap. Hey, Tabby.
Yeah, old
Welcome.
man Giles.
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Wow.
welcome. Yeah.
Already cast my vote. Proudly, I have a shirt that I wear on election day that says, I love Jesus. So I also love veterans, the disabled, the marginalized, the suffering. I believe I have a picture of it up on my page that I intentionally wear that. I moved to the Evangelical South about 7 years ago. And
Yeah.
it took us a while to find a home church. I ended up missing going to church, and we tried out several hellfire and brimstone places because that's the way it seemed to be. I think I talked with you guys on the God Pod.
God Squad. Yeah.
Yes. And said, down here, people are more interested in being right, and their way is the only way they have the answers. They are right than they are in being loved.
Yeah.
I think politics has gotten that way too.
Yeah. I
They're
agree.
more interested in their way is the right way. They have the power. You do what they say.
Right.
Rather than you're a public servant. Let's remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've always said that's been my early on. That was my concern. Is even when evangelical Christians were really getting very politically motivated. It's more about it's like it felt to me like you've lost faith in the gospel and what Jesus was saying. Like one person at a time, changing someone's heart, allowing the Holy Spirit to transform them from the inside out into someone who looks and acts and loves and forgives like Jesus. That was his plan, right? And the evangelical Christians trying to transform the world through political means is basically saying, yeah, Jesus, we're giving up on that. That takes too long. we don't want to do that because then we have to get to know people and talk to them and listen and befriend them and love them. And that's just takes too long. Forget that. We're just going to pass a bunch of laws and we're going to just force everybody to pretend that they think like us and believe like we do. And it's an abandoning what Jesus was actually all about and just deciding, let's take a detour and a shortcut and just have power to control people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had made a comment in backstage that there was a story that happened today. You wanted to tell us a story that happened at church today?
Literally what you just said was a conversation I had.
Oh, okay.
Because I was sitting at a table with somebody that's made it very clear that he has a bit of a aggressive nature towards the marginalized communities, and he's anti-racism. He angrily said on Easter, this is because of your president, as far as trans visibility day, and has said other negative things in an aggressive way. Well, we were sitting this morning around a breakfast table, and there was actually a visiting pastor from Macon, a woman that I hadn't met before, and we had talked about it. I had showed her, we were talking about officials or voting, and I showed her that picture of me with the shirt standing next to the early voting sign, and she said about how she liked that. And the gentleman, well, who did you vote for, though? And first thing I did, thank you, Keith, for teaching me this.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know what? It's not just who I vote for. Remember, we're voting for an official, but we still have responsibility in this. This is not we actually have more effect when we're staying in touch with our representatives.
Mm-hmm.
Our vote for president is not the end all be all of everything. Yes, it is extremely important, but staying in touch with and bringing your concerns to your representatives are vital in this process. And talking with the we're all sitting at the same table talking with the priest from Macon, who was visiting to talk about we're about to make our pledges for what we're gonna give this year, just so can balance a budget, so on and so forth. And we went further into the conversation by me saying about, after I said about being in touch with your leaders, I said, and also, if we're going to call ourselves Christians, it doesn't fall on the government to take care of everybody.
Yeah. We're supposed to love our neighbor and care for one another. Yeah.
Exactly. The church needs to be involved in things. We need to care about people outside of ourselves. Beatitudes, essentially. And she, that's right.
Yeah.
That is, if we're going to call ourselves followers of Jesus, I stopped saying Christian, and however, I don't remember how I phrased it, but I said something like that, and she goes, yeah, I've had to say I'm Christian, but I'm not that kind of Christian. And it's
right. Yeah, I'm a love your neighbor Christian, not a storm the Capitol one.
Exactly.
Well,
explain that back to me when I say I like to call myself a follower of Jesus Christ instead of saying Christian, because of how that's been taken over to shame the name of Christ, as far as I'm concerned, instead of showing that love. If God is love, are we making a good representative of God? Are we being the hands and feet of God if we are mistreating other people?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
are we being Old Testament wrathful God here, or who gave us that right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
Well,
that's really good. Thank you, Tabby. I'm sorry, we're running now a little bit over time, and we want to be careful of our time with Paul and Ashley. But thank you so much for jumping on. Thank you for your comments, as always.
Thanks,
Really
Debbie.
appreciate that. Yeah, so as we're wrapping it up here, Paul and Ashley, let everyone know where they can find you, what you guys are doing. Tell us about your book, Paul, and about your podcast and all of that, where people can keep up with you guys.
First off, just thanks for having us and on your new show, and we're big fans of you guys, and so this is really an honor. We've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being our
Yeah.
guest.
thank
It's
you.
been fun. Time flew by.
Yeah, I'll add my thanks too. We're fans of yours, so we're really honored to have spent this time with you, and just want to encourage people to support the work of Matthew and Keith and do everything you can to help keep them doing what they're doing. You can join us on Wednesday nights live at 6:00 Pacific at Evangelicalish. You can go to our YouTube channel. You can find out more on our website, evangelicalish.com. And then, of course, our shows are posted within a couple days after our Wednesday night live show. I will just say that I am way goofier and pretty much, I don't know. I've been trying to be very serious this morning. I'll just say it that way. So Wednesday
Well, you're on the
night,
wrong show for that.
I'm the straight man for her craziness.
I'll have to come back and but Sunday morning, something about this, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta like be my best self. But yeah, we just try to have fun, talk about what's going on in our lives, what's going on all around us, religion, politics, and spiritual health and well-being, and what we're trying to do to find that in our lives now at this juncture. So we'd love to have folks check us out there. And then, yeah, Paul's book is a really good read. Religious Right, Religiously Wrong. The fun fact is that this book, it's a fiction book, but it is an amalgamation of characters and true events that we experienced in our 8 years of doing the mayor thing and the pastor thing at the same time. So it's really kind of a little bit autobiographical. So it's a lot of Easter eggs in that book, if you know anything about our community.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
loved being with you all, and hope to see you again soon.
And I'm on all the socials at Unconventional Pastor Paul, which is on the screen there. So
Awesome.
Yeah. So give them a follow. Keith, your last words before the
Oh
end
my
of
gosh.
this.
I don't know. Well, this is a lot of fun. I just really appreciate both of you having this conversation. Great conversation. We went to a lot of really great places, and I think very thought-provoking stuff. And thank you all of you who left comments
Yeah.
and who
thank
watched
you.
us live. And if you're listening to the podcast version, thank you also for that. Please like and share and subscribe and all that. We'd appreciate that too.
Yeah. And I also have a new book. So pick up
Oh, that's
Heretic.
right.
yes,
You heretics and heathens. Pick it up wherever you buy books. And we'll see you. Well, we'll see you on Tuesday, and then we'll see you next Sunday here live.
Yeah, that's right.
We basically give you a show almost every day, folks.
Yeah,
Peter, thank you. Debbie, everyone who commented, y'all are wonderful. Thank you for Tabby for joining us, and we want to get more people on here. So next week we hope to have a couple callers.
yeah, please join us. Don't be
And
shy.
if we could bring the band back onto the stage.
There we
See
go.
y'all.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.